Well, welcome back to another episode of LorcanaChats. I'm Chris, aka Questing for Lore, and I have a question for you. Have you ever wanted to move to the more competitive side of Lorcana? Or maybe you're already there and just want to hone your skills? Well, you're in luck, because joining me in today's episode is none other than HarlanSweete, Blue Steel aficionado, Kiwi Bird fan, and competitive player that came in first at the Disney headquarters influencer set champs. If you're looking for competitive advice, look no further. Let's get to it. Well, hey Harlan, how you doing?
I'm very good, thanks. How are you? How about yourself?
Oh, not too bad, not too bad. It's starting to get warmer outside, so that's always nice.
Oh, don't know how much time difference we are from apart, but it's getting darker here now.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I think it's about 5 hours between us, so well, thanks for joining me today. I really appreciate you taking the time, and I look forward to chatting, especially about some of the competitive stuff. That's always interesting to me because I'm much more of a casual player. So it's always cool to get the perspective of somebody that's out there and really participating in these competitive events, and get their ideas and suggestions for anybody that might be new to the game. Um,
Hmm.
well, tell me a little bit about yourself. Kind of how you came to Lorcana, when you found out about it. Any other TCGs you might have played.
Yeah, so I came to Lorcana right at the start of the game, and the one I was playing at the time was Pokemon.
Mm.
That was what I was playing before this. And I remember it was announced, and we were still going to, they're called League Challenges in Pokemon. It's pretty much the same experience as a store champ. And it was
Okay.
like in between rounds, people would talk about, like, oh, there's this new Disney game. Oh, do you think it's going to, basically kill Pokemon and kill Magic? And I never had the assumption it would do that, but I think
Yeah.
I had the assumption it could find its spot in the community. And I think a lot of the more old timer TCG players are like, well, if Disney money is in there, it definitely has a shot. They just need to put Disney money pricing, and they didn't really need to do that. They just had to make a golden Mickey card, didn't they? And
Yeah.
that's going to, of course, hold a lot of value. So I had such an interest in it, and then I got to play some of it. It was very hard to get the product, and of
Mhm.
course, Pixelborn was like the only way to really access the game for a while as well, because I live in the UK and we don't have these 1K, 2K, 10K events that you're very fortunate to have in the US. And I just loved it. I love the inking system. I think if you've played any other TCG for a length of time, it's quite a bit horrible with deck building to have to put in like land cards or energy cards as you have in Pokemon. It's like it's not really a 60 card deck because 20 of those cards have to be these really boring art like cards that say like lightning energy or something.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, so I definitely jumped to it, and then of course when I got to playing it and realizing how new it was, like it was really a game where if you wanted to try and make a mark as like a TCG player at a competitive level, you could really do that. And I've been fortunate enough to do that and get to do awesome interviews and stuff and play in big events and do videos as well. So yeah, I mean before that I played Hearthstone and stuff. It's more of I've always been around competitive TCGs, but like never had the opportunity to you know give it this much attention as I have. When you're a kid, you can't pay £40 each for a Tamatar or
Right.
whatever the card is at the
Right.
time.
Yeah.
You can't. When you're like 15 or something like that, you can only save up so much money, and then you get to a point when you're about 18, 19, and you go to college or move out or whatever, and you're a little bit busy. So
Hmm.
this has just hit me all at the right time in the so is the game. So yeah, I'm really enjoying the experience so far and the journey.
Nice. Nice. So you bring up the whole pricing thing. As somebody like who played Pokemon, I know some of those decks are just ridiculously expensive. Now I know there's still some expensive Lorcana decks, but how do you think those compare?
I mean, Pokemon, I think out of the big three, so like Magic and Yu-Gi-Oh! And Pokemon, it always had the idea that it was the cheapest of the three,
Mm.
because they focus in a lot on the alternative art cards. Like one card can have like five alternative arts, and there's not just one enchanted that everyone's chasing. So the price in that is a bit down, but it's still a TCG. And like, if the new broken legendary, you know, super rare card is out and it's released the week before, it's probably going to be about $40 or something like that each. So I think in Lorcana, I mean, especially with this set with all the Sapphire cards, and at a competitive level, it kind of feels a bit insane to not play Sapphire, really.
Yeah.
Which of course then comes with the price tag, and then it's like I built the Sapphire Steel ramp deck and played it, and I wasn't even like winning the event that I was in, and then it's like, what, I've spent, you know, so many hundreds of dollars and I'm not even winning. So it's like just that entry point to play can feel a bit crazy. But I think there's also a point that there are a bunch of decks out there you can play that are fairly cheap. I think the Amethyst Steel ones are fairly cheap. I'd like to say the Lady and the Tramp deck that I don't know if you've seen around. I'd like to say that's pretty cheap, but it does require some Rapunzels and Daisies and a few cards that cost a bit more money. But there's always been in like every TCG I play. I also play One Piece. And even in that, there's a deck that, you know, it costs you about $40. You can get going, and it's in the past won regionals and stuff like that. So,
oh wow,
and with Lorcana as well. I mean, in the past, like Ruby Amethyst is always labeled as quite a cheap deck, and it won a continental, didn't it? And it won another one as well. Like Ed's build was, I think, around $100 or less, and had no cards from that set that it was released in. So I think definitely price point can sometimes be an interesting topic, but it's always been proven that there are options for you to play if you don't want to be, you know, shifting out this large amount of money for these new expensive cards.
Yep, definitely. And I like how some of the LGSs are kind of reinforcing that a little bit. They have, you know, they call them the Porcana events, where it's like you can only play commons, uncommons, and rares, you know, and some of them don't even allow rares. And so you have to, you know, you really come up with these like creative budget kind of decks. And it's interesting, you know, that's a thing that's kind of already started with a game as young as this. So.
Yeah, we also have those sort of theme nights as well that do get you searching for your bulk box to find whatever. And I think those are great at a local level. I am terrible at them. You know, if you gave me a make it around a movie theme, I'm terrible at Disney movies, so I always lose at those events. But yeah, I've always found TCGs accessible for everyone at a certain point. It may mean you won't have a playset of the latest legendary card, but you should still be able to get involved.
Yeah, definitely. So I have to ask, and this is something that, you know, I've heard the name, and I heard it was based on some kind of joke or misunderstanding or something. But the whole Kiwi Birds thing, where did that come from?
Yeah, so I test online with a group of people, and we have a little Discord, and you know, you have your little servers. And me and the gentleman who made the deck, Justin, he goes by Jack Shadows online. He was the originator. It was basically the whole idea of this aggro style Sapphire Steel was as popular as everyone is seeing Sapphire Steel right now. For the last two sets, it was probably like one of the worst performing competitive decks for a long time. So he wanted to kind of approach it at a different. He's like, right, let's just rebuild it. You know, let's start completely from scratch. And every time we would join a Discord call, you'd have one pop up and then another pop up. And our other friend, Dave, who goes by Attack for Two, said we look like sort of Kiwi birds, like following each other through the wild. And then I think I put it as the nickname on Dreamborn, just because you need to put a name in it. So I did. And then the Inkdex took it from my Dreamborn when I won the content creator store champs. And now it just seems to be everywhere. And it's madness. I did an event on Saturday, and the person next to me was playing the list, and he didn't know who I was. And I don't know. It's just like, he didn't need to know who I was. I wasn't like, you know, upset or anything, but it was just this thing of like, wow, this deck is so big at this point. Like, it's so out there that like the original connection of where it came from is also getting like disconnected. Like, it's that widespread. I thought it was quite awesome.
Is it always the same list, or are there variants of it?
So the idea of it, to be honest with you, at this point, it's losing a bit of its meaning as we go into set 7 and we change it so much. But it's more of just playing a Sapphire Steel list that aims to do a curve. So a curve archetype is just you want to play the most prominent, the most powerful character you can on turn 1, turn 2, turn 3, and you should just technically be outvaluing them because you're playing. If you play a turn 1 Bell as you got in set 7, you play a Smee, you play an Alice, you play a Pluto, and you ward it up, then you finish it with a Cogsworth. You should have this really strong curve where it's pretty impenetrable, and you don't really care about card draw, and you don't really care about setting up a dime or whatever, and then you just quest out and win the game. So I think the core components seem to be Alice and Pluto, and aiming to do a curve style Sapphire Steel deck.
Okay. Okay. Hang on one sec. So let's switch over to your decks here. So which one do you think is the best example? I mean, you've got the set 7 that you did the video for. You want me to pull that one up and talk through it a little bit?
Yeah, I've got that one, and then I didn't realize how many people liked it. It's got like 700 and something, which I'm amazingly grateful for. But when I like test and stuff, I will put a new card in, and I will take new cards out pretty much on the fly because I will put it in and it will be a terrible choice, and then I'll take it out again. And it's just like constantly evolving, and it doesn't really look good for someone who just wants to check Dreamborn and find a list. But this is I think this is what I like to leave this one as. You could pick this up, take it to your locals, and it should be performing pretty well.
Nice. Yeah, I see it's got that Tamatoa in there. It's interesting that there are... Oh, there they are. There's not that many items for using a Tamatoa. I'm curious what your reasoning behind that was.
Yeah, so actually, we can cover it on the other Dreamborn list as well afterwards. But this is like I said, this is the one that I think you could pick up and it should be working fine. The items, when we got it, because in the previous set we used card draw was Doc, and we just put 4 Doc in the deck. And as I say, we were aiming to just do a strong curve. We didn't really care too much about card draw, but when you need it, you played a Doc and you got 2 more. In this set, playing Bell turn 1 is like, it could just outright win you a game, so we can't not be doing that. So we put the Porpsicles back in there, which means now we kind of need a bit more use for them. So we put the Hiram in there, and then we can capitalize a little bit more on the Tamatoa. I think, though, personally, in testing, as it's kind of going, I think we could maybe cut the Tamatoa, which I know a lot of people are jumping for joy because they don't have to buy a playset of this ridiculously expensive
$60 right now. Yeah.
Which was mad with the Tamatoas because I in the UK you can do pre-orders. I think you probably can in the US. I don't see why not. And I pre-ordered them when they were like £32, and now they're up to about £50. And I remember everyone was saying, "Oh, pre-orders are a joke. They're they're just scamming you." And now we managed to save a bit of money. But the Tamatoa can give so much more length to the deck. I mean, before, as I said, we were just playing a curve out, and then if we got a Doc, we got a bit more card draw and a bit more things to throw on the board. But here we have the full item package and a Tamatoa. We're recycling so many Porpsicles. You can get very late into the game and still have 5, 6, 7, up to like 10 cards in hand. And it's interesting. There's another player called Artabax who's come to this sort of Sapphire Steel list as well, and he's made his own version. He doesn't play the Alice or the Pluto, but he did a game versus Ed in the cross-continental, which I'd really recommend someone watching because you just watch the resource wall. They're playing big Sisus, they're B-prepping the board, but you still got 11 cards in hand every time they do it. So it's just, okay, you killed my Lawrence, you killed my Smee, you killed my Bell, cool, here's another 3 of them. And I'm just going to play a McDuck Manor as well as on top of that. And then they board wipe again. Yeah, and then they board wipe him again, and he's like, cool, I'll just play a Hiram, I'll play another 3 more cards, and eventually you should run out of removal, and I'm never going to run out because Tamatoa recycles the Porps, Hiram draws me more cards, and it just doesn't stop. So, it's really fascinating, especially in Sapphire Steel, where we're so used to just ramping, and we're seeing there's Oswald builds, that you've got like, I'd probably say about 5 different ways to build Sapphire Steel in this set.
Nice. Yeah, I was listening to somebody, I think it was this Lorcana podcast, their latest episode. And I didn't really even think about it before they mentioned it. And you just said the same thing. You can only put so much removal in these decks, right? You can put in all you want. And I see you've got the usual ones there, the usual culprits. But But yeah, I mean, there's only so many things you can do. Otherwise, your deck just basically becomes about removal, which is is no fun
Yeah,
either. So yeah, it's interesting to
and
find that balance.
yeah, and it's if you know what the removal is, and you just count it up down, and you just say, well, you've used one big CC, you probably got two more, or you
Hmm.
maybe have one more, and then you go, well, you've used one, be prepared, you might have another one, and yeah, you'll just outvalue them, and that big Tamatawa is just a value machine, really.
Yeah,
That six cost
yeah.
one, and I think I am going to cut it because I think it doesn't lend to the aggro style game plan. I'm sometimes making games last a lot longer than they should do, but the thing is, it's such a powerful card that I've still got it included in there, and it just wins you games by it being a powerful card.
Hmm.
Um, so yeah, it's quite a monster.
Yeah, yeah. We'll be seeing a whole lot of it for the next couple of
Mm.
months.
Oh, yeah, Sapphire in
Yeah.
general, yeah.
Yep, yep. Yeah, I've heard from a couple of people that just Sapphire decks have started picking up again as well. You know, not even the Sapphire Steel or anything. It's just like more people are getting clued into the benefits of playing Sapphire, and so they're just trying to, combine it with basically anything they can.
Yeah, there'll always be the Sapphire Emerald players around. They love
Hmm.
that. They got a bunch of toys as well to play in this set with the new Ink Geyser card. That's great. And Ruby Sapphire, when you go from that being a set like the last set when it was dominating, I think it was taking 35% meta shares in rooms to this set, it's not going to just fall off completely. They still got the Sapphire coil as well.
Yep,
But
yep.
in testing, it feels like it's so strange to me that that deck is falling behind. It just felt like it never could. But when you've got Bell and you've got the new Scrooge as well, and you can set up these characters to sing removal like Let the Storm, Strength, and Zeus.
Hmm.
And what is the Ruby player doing? They'll be playing like a Brawl or something, or it's not adding up the value wise.
Yeah, yeah.
So it's crazy for me to see Ruby fall behind this much. But in testing right now, yeah, it's sort of really falling behind.
Yeah. Yeah, I've been doing a little bit of Ruby Steel testing myself, and it's difficult. It's definitely very heavily relying on Steel. There's not a lot of new Ruby kind of stuff that really helps out very much, but
Hmm.
there was an interesting, let's see, what was it? Um, no, I don't know if any of those are new actually. Oh no, one of them is the Mushu. Um, so I was playing with Calhoun, Thebes, and Mushu on the board all at the same time. And Calhoun banished. It got the extra two from Mushu, and Calhoun was at Thebes when she did it. And so it's like six right there. And I was like, okay, that's crazy. I probably never do it again, but that's kind of crazy. So it was interesting.
I
But
played, I think it was Law Games on his channel, and he whooped me a couple games on Red Steel,
yeah,
and I was on a bit more of the aggro style Sapphire Steel. But it's crazy for me that that deck's going to get popular this set. But if you got paired into say an Oswald or a Sapphire Steel ramp deck, they don't really have to turn sideways
yeah,
until their
yeah,
Tamatar quests for about 11 lore. So
yeah.
for a challenge based deck that's getting its lore through challenging, it feels quite interesting. But I think there's a lot of these other decks that are kept quite in the dark with Sapphire's supremacy right now.
Hmm.
Like Lady and the Tramps felt really good. Um, and as you say, Red Steel as well. They got some awesome cards. Even Red Green, I've seen some really awesome builds with it. But
Yeah. Okay.
um, all of these Sapphire builds, like they're just probably going to be taking the top levels of the competitive play and get the most
Yeah.
spotlight as well.
Yeah. Yeah, it's hard when there's no way to interact with their stuff. There's a couple of I guess there's a couple of Ruby characters. We got the new oh god, what's his name? That can on the Ruby side that can go after readied characters.
Oh,
Li
there's
Shang.
the yeah, Lee Shank,
Yeah.
yeah.
Hmm.
Which I'd like to see more of in Lorcana, to be honest with you. There's a lot of things if you don't really have to quest of anything until you basically need to get a bunch of lore. But being able to challenge those ready ones would be awesome. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. It's super nice sometimes. Well, cool. Well, I want to move on. I want to get talking a little bit about some of the content creation that you do. You put out loads of videos. A lot of them, a lot of them are like the deck profiles, kind of like we're talking about here. You've done some interviews, live gameplay, matchup guides, all sorts of stuff. Um, so I'm curious, was that something that came out of, being a part of the competitive events, or was that kind of first and then you kind of moved into the competitive scene?
Yeah, so I started with Pixelborn, and it was fairly easy to make a name for yourself back then because there wasn't
Mhm.
any DLCs for the first long time in Lorcana. So if you were performing one on Pixelborn, and if you were playing a lot and people were remembering your name, they had a top 25 leaderboard. It was very, and they had these. Thea used to do these events called the Pack, and if you made a cut in that, your list got out there.
Oh yeah, I remember
Um,
those. Yeah.
yeah, and that, I think at that point that was like the pinnacle of Lorcana, was if you made a cut at them, that was like the biggest thing you could get really, in like respect and attention wise.
Hmm.
So back then, and I used to always be in the discords in 20 Law as well, and all the places talking about Sapphire Steel. And with the content wise, it was just, I keep getting like DMs about it, and I thought it was awesome. But in DMs, you're answering the same question about 5 times because,
Yeah.
of course, they don't know that a few others have asked you. So I put a video up, and then it got like 1,000 views or something, and like, wow, okay, people were subscribing to this, and it's pretty much, I've just been doing that for the past year, I think now. And then it's very easy for me to do the videos. It's, people seem to be fine with the click record chat thing and just talk
Yeah.
over it. And a lot of them are guides, and I've tried to do other things, like I don't always just play Sapphire Steel, which shocks a lot of people. I play Amber Steel. I think one of my favorite decks was Green Steel in set 3. That was just before Diablo,
Hmm.
and I used to love playing that. It was this really interesting deck, and it was really about challenging as well. Um, but people didn't seem to really click too much with that, and
Hmm.
you kind of find your place in the community. And I'm very happy, like, being this sort of Sapphire Steel like library on the channel,
Yeah.
or custodian sort of person, and I quite like that. And yeah, I really enjoy it, and I do enjoy playing Sapphire Steel quite a lot. It probably is my favorite color, and that's
Yeah.
hard to debate. And yeah, you just do. I just do a video every couple of days, and it tends to be what people have been talking about or what people have been messaging me. And I go, oh, everyone's been asking me, like, how do we play this bell card? And then I'll do a video about, like, when do you want to play bell? Do you always want to play a
Yeah.
turn one? Do you not? And then, of course, if a lot of people keep losing in a matchup, I'll go, okay, let's do a video on that matchup.
Hmm.
And yeah, it's very easy to keep to like sort of free flow with that. And people just seem to enjoy it. So I'm just going to keep doing that, I think.
Nice, nice. Yeah, it's kind of cool to see how it does relate to current questions, the current meta, and I'm sure it's interesting to go back and look at some of these things, because I mean, you got, uh, let's see, you started what, 9, 10 months ago, something like that, on the content creation side, at least on your current channel. I don't know if you did you do anything
Oh
before
yeah, no,
that?
I think my Twitter was over a year old, but I think the channel should be
Okay.
about 10 months or so. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. Um, yeah, I'm sure with that, it's interesting to go back and kind of see, oh yeah, we were focusing on this, or, maybe looking back a couple of sets, at a video gives you some ideas for a new deck in the latest set or something. It's kind of cool. I like that, how you kind of talk about the most current stuff. Because I'm sure,
Yeah.
especially being on 20 lore, y'all get all sorts of questions about this stuff. And being well known for a Sapphire Steel player, I'm sure that also brings in a lot of people. So, um,
Yeah, I do look back, and also the old Dreamborns, and it's like we were playing that card back then.
yeah.
And then
Yeah.
you get nostalgic. Like there was a Mickey Mouse card from set 1 we used to always play in Sapphire Steel to ramp for you. And it's just like,
The
I wouldn't even
detective.
dream of playing that, right? Yeah, the detective one.
Yeah.
So I wouldn't even dream of playing that. But for a while in 20 Law, we used to debate playing that card or One Jump Ahead, which was better. And that would take hours out of our week for no real reason besides we were so like passionate and loved this like ink color
Yeah.
combo. And I think if you scroll back 20 Law about 6 months or so, you'll see these massive debates over which one's better. And none of it really mattered. It's all a card game. We all love it. It all comes from a passionate place. But
Yep.
yeah, just hours spent debating these questions.
Well, that's half the fun, right? Thinking through the cards, thinking through your play lines, all that kind of stuff is it people get passionate about it, like you said.
Yeah, I always sort of joke about it in the threads with the Sapphire Steel because then we'll move on to a new thing, and
Hmm.
I'll say like, "Oh, the Great War of Mickey versus One Jump Ahead is over. Now begins the war of Oswald's versus all the other decks," and then
Yep.
everyone just complains about Oswald. But it's really interesting because you look at the other decks and like Ruby Amethyst, they'll be like, "I don't know, I play 2 Tremaine or 3 Tremaine," and like that's their biggest talking point. And
Hmm.
yeah, Sapphire Steel had so many directions, and then as well, where we managed to get the Kiwi build out there. And I really love this about Lorcana. Like at the start, if someone was playing a color combo, you kind of knew almost all 60 cards in their deck because the card pool was quite limited. So you only really had one way to build it. But now it's like when you play against Ruby Sapphire, is it one of these DKP Maui Shark burn lists, or is it more of a sailor with the big Sisu? And you've got the same with Sapphire Steel now. There's loads of different ways to build it, which is a really good direction for the game. Not just being, oh, they're playing those 2 colors, it's this deck. It could
Hmm.
be up to 5 different decks now.
Yep. Yep. It's cool to see some of the creativity out there. Even when you see like, there'll be a deck that wins like at a DLC or something, and you get a lot of people that are, pick up that deck just straight up. And then as time goes on, you see small modifications to it, things that
Mm.
people are like, oh, yeah, I didn't think about that one card from, 3 sets ago that, because we're up to, how many cards are we up to? Like 1,200 cards or something total?
Yeah, it's really good for the game, and
Hmm.
it's interesting to see because the first list I had for I got to qualify for the EU Continentals with a Kiwi build, and there's cards in there that I wouldn't tell anyone to play. Like we were still quite really in the testing with it. I think it was a real stroke
Hmm.
of luck. I think we ended up getting 40th, which I still think is fairly decent,
Yes.
being like
Yeah, not bad.
better
Yeah.
than half of the room. It wasn't really in there for prizing, but I was like, we were running like set one smash in here just so we don't die to an Ursula or something. And there
Hmm.
was no real reason to have that card in there. And it was funny. Even when I was playing, I was like, after each round, I would message Justin. I said the gentleman who originally made the deck, and I was like, oh, we've got to cut this card. It's terrible. I've inked it every game. And it must be funny for people who win DLCs and stuff like that because they're like, oh yeah, no, those were definitely cards I'd change in my list after winning the DLC. And of course, as well, once you make a list public, everyone starts trying to beat it.
Yep.
So
Yep.
a lot of the cards in there become less relevant and need to be changed as well. So I always find that really interesting.
Yep. Yeah, it's cool that that's an interesting point about like once you make it public, or it gets published somewhere, everybody sees it as the deck to beat, that top
Mm,
deck. Now you get some outliers, right? So you have some of the DLCs that were won by like just odd decks with with weird cards that nobody else is playing, but
yeah.
outside of that, it's pretty standard as far as like the structure for a lot of these decks. It's just the small differences, it seems like, is kind of the main difference.
The first deck, I think it was the one that won Atlanta, and it was
Hmm.
a Amber Amethyst Fairy, and it's just like no one played that. I didn't
Yeah,
say it anyway.
yeah,
I think
yeah.
someone maybe brought it to their locals once, but yeah, that was the most maddest thing. That like the
Hmm.
first one, and I'm having to like Google what this deck actually is because I've never seen it before.
Yep.
Um, yeah, you do have some outlanders like that, and I think a lot of the players, like I talk to Ed sometimes, and he is very good at like with his at Ruby Amethyst list. I always like to use that as an example. He was like, right, I'm going to play a lot of Ruby Sapphire. I might lose with these other matchups, but as long as I play enough Ruby Sapphires, I'll win. And yeah,
Hmm.
that deck I don't think performs very well into Steel Song or the Diggy Hole deck, but he
Yeah.
was really predicting what he'd play into, and I think that's what a lot of these top level players get for just thinking outside the bubble on that and thinking at that level.
Yep. Yeah, that's a whole different thing. You start out, building these decks and you think about, okay, I'm going to match this with this and this combos with this and all that. But then you add on top of that from the competitive side of, okay, now I know there's going to be all these people playing this list, so I'm going to compensate for that. So,
Mm,
maybe you switch out 2 or 3 cards, that because there's going to be a lot more items out there, right? So you put something in
mm,
specifically to deal with that kind of thing. It's interesting, and I guess for the competitive side of things, that's common practice, I imagine. To where iterate on these decks and you try to figure out, what's going to be the best to compensate for, for those things.
Yeah, so in some of the TCGs you get things like sideboarding, which is you'll have a few selection of cards that you can swap into the deck. With Lorcana, you can't really do that, and I think you can't really make a deck as well that's going to beat every deck in the meta.
Yeah.
So you have to be like, where am I going to take my wins? Where am I going to take my losses? And hopefully get the good pairings in the day. I've never been able to do that very well. I'm always like, I'll build for this matchup and then never see it for the entire day.
Yeah. It's always
Which,
the way.
sometimes, yeah, it's just sometimes bad luck and how it is. And you think, you tell your friends, oh, that deck wasn't popular, and then they go, what do you mean it was like 30% of the room, the meta share in that room? I didn't see one of them all day. But that's how it works. And yeah, it's just quite interesting sort of going. It's funnier for me though, and I've talked to players like Artifacts as well, who when you're known for a certain deck, you're most likely going to play that deck. You can't really do that. You can tech some cards in to give you a better performance in some matchups, but you're going to bring a certain deck to a room. And it's funny when you get paired as well, as most will just know what you're going to be playing and know how to mulligan against you. Which is always funny where like someone beats you quite well and they go, oh, I like your videos, like right after the game, because they were mulliganing like exactly for what you were playing. Which is, yeah, it's sweet and it's nice, but it's always funny out there.
Yeah. So I do want to touch on one of your videos in particular. Now, I know it kind of relates to specific situations and decks and stuff, but it doesn't seem to be something that a lot of people kind of cover in their content. And it's the falling behind video that you made. I'm interested in some of your thoughts, as far as like when people do get too far behind, what kinds of things could they potentially look for or think about to help them catch up? Now sometimes the opposing deck just runs away with it, and there's no way. But are there any tips, any suggestions that you have for people to try and kind of get back in the game a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of people, what they can do is pick up a deck, learn its best line, and get their wins in there. But of course, when those lines don't work, they might not. Anyone could play Flynn and Sisu on those turns and then win, but they don't know how to operate the deck when it's losing. And to answer your Ruby Amethyst, I wouldn't either. But you're trying to get behind. You're trying to get that tempo swing back into the game. In Lorcana, the best ways to do that is singing and shifting, because we get sort of to play at an ink advantage. If you're able to sing and play cards on that turn, you might end up doing like a 6 ink turn on turn 3, or what have you, which is awesome because you're getting more value. There are some decks though that when they just get behind, they're just too far behind. Mainly those sort of aggro style decks. They were needing to win by turn 3. And at that point, you need to maybe just say, all right, I've lost, and just go to the next game. I would say, though, for anyone playing at a competitive level, if you are losing, don't always just scoop up and move on to the next game. Try to draw the game out, and all that does is give you knowledge on what cards your opponent plays. So just keep playing, just make them play cards. So you're like, all right, I know they have Hideaway in their deck, so I'll try play around that with my dime or something like that. That's always good for people. And then just scoop when you think it's just pointless to keep playing. But yeah, trying to play from behind, you're really trying to look for anything that can tempo swing you back into the game. You're really looking for ways for them to mess up as well. And if they've played a Hiram and they're draw some cards and they're a higher card value, you have to be like, right, well, they don't have another Popsicle. So if they don't play another one, they don't draw another 2 or 3 cards. And you have to try get your way back into that way. Playing with a big ink advantage as well. Maybe you just take some turns off to ramp up, or do whatever your deck does best to try and swing back into it. The Sapphire decks are really quite good at getting back into the game. I think I was playing with someone last night and they said the only 2 real decks right now that can get back into the game is Sapphire Steel and Ruby Sapphire. All the other ones, once they're out, they're kind of pretty far behind. Which it is unfortunate, but if you've lost your board and you've only got like 5 lore on your Amethyst Steel, it's fairly hard for you to try and fight for the board back and then aggro them out. So yeah, playing from behind is always fairly difficult. You need to really look down to every detail, every little mistake that they could make. Maybe they exert a character when they shouldn't have done, or maybe they don't play Pete when they should have done, and just try and take advantage of all those moments.
Yeah, I like that the idea of just dragging it out some to be able to see more of their cards. Even if you don't end up winning that round, it's still good to kind of understand what you're up against. That's cool.
Yeah,
I hadn't really thought about that.
Yeah, I think it's best if you sort of, to say you had some spicy card in your deck that no one else is playing right now. Maybe ink that one, or you keep that one in your hand. But you could just do really dumb turns. They might know 100% what you're trying to do here. But if you watch Bivens has done this on one of his streamed games, and a few other players do, they'll just play Whole New World or something like that, just so they can keep getting more deck knowledge, so they can bring that into the next 2 games. Or the next game or so, which is it's just a fairly useful skill to have.
Yep, that's cool. I like that. Okay, so we mentioned you're part of 20 Lore. So I'm interested, how have you enjoyed being a part of a competitive team, and what do you think are the biggest advantages to being a part of that?
So 20 Lore is not a team, they're like an organization. But they're like a cool server and stuff. They just do organized events and stuff like that. I don't believe they have a team, because they did the Hunter Biden event recently.
Right.
No, they're really cool guys. When they started out, I think they were called Masters of Lorcana. This was like a year ago, and I joined their mod team. And it's been great, and they've been quite a pillar of the community. But yeah, they run different events, and they're sort of the hub of so many great decks have come from there, and so many great players have sort of made themselves known from there. And yeah, if you win a DLC or whatever and you pop up in there, it's just great to see. You've got like DKP in there, who's been winning a lot recently, and like Ed and the Rat, and they're all just like having casual conversations.
Yeah, that's cool. I constantly see all these new decks being churned out over there. I lurk over in that Discord as well. And it's really cool to see, everything, all the discussions and everything that's being tossed around over there. And, some of that stuff you don't necessarily see in some of the other Discords and, conversation places, I guess, social media, whether it be Twitter or Blue Sky or Reddit or Facebook, but we don't talk about those very much. So
no, it is really awesome for, anyone out there. Definitely aren't getting to 20 Lore, because not every TCG has this. It's such like a tight community then it's a big community, but it's everyone's there. And it's like, after one of the pack events, I remember you went to the general chat, and it was like the winner, like DeCandio, would be chatting with everyone. And that's just awesome. You wouldn't have that in other, like in Pokemon, when someone wins a regional or whatever, they don't just jump into a Discord and start putting memes about their winning or something like that, or talking about their deck. Like, it's just so awesome. It's so awesome, like the community base for Lorcana, and how well everything is.
Yep. So we talked a little bit before. You were, or most of the DLCs and events, bigger events you've been to, have been over in Europe. But you did say you came over to the Seattle one, correct?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. So I'm curious of your perspectives of, comparing the two kind of competitive feel, between the two. I'm sure the metas are different, because it's different kinds of decks that are floating around in different places. But I'm curious on your perspective of any differences or similarities that you see between them.
Yeah, I was really excited to do it, because we always have this chat, and there's a bit of shade for each other, just competitive fun of, oh, Europeans are better than Americans, and no, we're better than you, and like, and I was like, oh, I think probably we're all very equal, and it's not that bad, and everyone's really good. I went over there, and like I say, there were some games it felt they were better, so I think we're pretty much both fine on that. The interesting thing that I've always found, and it's sort of joked about, is Americans seem to really love discard decks, or they really love green steel. And what I found funny was, sort of, if you play Green Steel in the UK, we're very apologetic people. We don't want to upset anyone. We don't want to do anything too exciting, and
Right.
even in Europe and stuff like that. And I've had people when they're discarding me apologize, and say, oh, I'm really sorry, Sudden Shield, could you discard a card? and like we're almost so sheepish to the point where that deck doesn't really get played here. And whenever I deck build, like an American will say like, oh, have you got Diablo answers? I'm like, why? Like I maybe will play that once over a month. I don't need to see it. And then I went to America and I played like 5 in a row. Like I think every other matchup was Green Steel, and I loved that everyone's approach to discard was like, you guys are all just having a great time with it. It was like, oh, I'm gonna make you discard 2 cards, and they go, oh, you got me. And it was like, you guys were all just chill with it. You're all really fine and really enjoying it. So it seems like that deck just thrives more. I found in Europe, we kind of like these more tempo style decks, and that's why Emerald Amethyst seemed to be a lot more popular in Europe than Green Steel did. It does have some discard elements, but its main part is that it wants to tempo you out. And I've seen that even more with like the big weekend of Sapphire Steel's performance. It was like Oswald decks were winning, and in UK it was these tempo Kiwi low to the ground Sapphire Steels. And it's like, I think just the Americans like the high roll gambling, and we were like, no, we want consistent, we want it done. we just want to play 1, 2, 3.
No big explosion turns or anything.
No one's nothing too exciting for us. So there is some differences, I don't think, and also as well, what's funny, I said this a few times, when I did the European DLCs, everyone was so sort of, I wouldn't say strict, but when they do, the head judge comes out and they tell you, I'm your head judge for today, we're going to do this. It was like a really strict German guy or a really strict British guy. And then in America, it was like, can we get a hell yeah? And like everyone's like really chanting stuff like that. And I was like, I've never had this experience. Everyone's so excited and happy, and like all the snacks were like Doritos and sweets, whereas in Europe it was like European pastries and stuff like that. And I don't know. I really enjoyed my experience in Seattle. And there is this weird meta difference. I think as well, if you played in like an Asian meta, in Japan, like they would favor a lot of different decks than in every other TCG. This is the same. Like each 3 regions, for some reason, we just prefer different decks and we think they're better, so we play those ones. So it's fascinating. If anyone gets the chance to play in either regions as well, you'll really see the difference.
Yeah. I wonder how, when we finally get around to Worlds, how that kind of stuff is going to play into it. If the meta is going to be kind of one thing because everybody's coming together to the same event, or if they're going to bring their kind of flavor to the mix.
Yeah, we had, I think in Paris, we had Zan and a few of his team join us, and DKP seems to travel quite a lot. And we do have this mix of everyone around, but it'd be really interesting to see when we bring it all together and see what comes out on top. I think at the top levels, it sort of evens out a little bit more, because I think if you're a top level European player, I'm not calling myself that, I'm just saying, if you are, you probably should know the game plan into an Emerald Steel deck, even if you don't play it that much. Because we still have very good Emerald Steel players here. They're just in the minority. The same way I believe Americans still have popular and good Emerald Amethyst players, but it just seems I think the meta share percentage from Green Steel was sub anything in Europe for one event, and in America on that event, Zan had gone and won it with Emerald Steel, and it was just really interesting to see the decks we sort of prioritize.
Yeah. So I'm curious, based on your experience, if somebody is more on the casual side and wants to kind of get into the competitive scene and really, jump in, feet first, do you have any recommendations for them to kind of, of places where to start, any kind of resources that you recommend, anything? I mean, besides 20 lore, obviously, but
yeah, I mean, I think really it's quite interesting because my partner Ali, she sort of got very into the competitive side, and she was winning like back-to-back store champs, and she won a constructed event on Sunday, and it's just like from a very casual point to does very well now. We chat about the meta and stuff. So we have very fun date nights. But I think for anyone, just try and soak it in, try and get as much in like data as you can in. play as much as you can. Always try and play better opponents, I think, as well. If you're losing every day at League, that's completely fine, as long as you can walk away saying, but I learned this or whatever. I picked up One Piece recently, and yeah, for the first few weeks, I couldn't even get a game. I'm sat there trying to read my opponent's cards. I can't even get a game past them.
Yeah.
It must be horrible. But slowly, it's just practice, just getting into it. And then when you're at home, like just watching the videos, watch streams back, if you do a mulligan and then you watch, say, a top player do a mulligan and go, oh, they're doing it differently. You can learn, you can adapt, you can improve. There's tons of videos out there. And I think Sapphire Steel is the most popular right now, but I'd recommend anyone just pick 2 colors and just play those and just learn those. Because it's Sapphire Steel now, but for a long time it wasn't. We were not top of the meta. So your day will come, basically. And you really want to know how to operate a deck when it's not working. I could tell anyone, this is what you want to do. You want to play this character this turn, this turn, this turn on Amethyst Steel. And I'm pretty sure I could do that, but I wouldn't know what to do when I've got 3 docks in hand, and it's turn 1 or whatever. How to turn that into a win is very good. And yeah, I can do that with Sapphire Steel. I played it to the point where this hand's not very good, but I'm sure I can work this into a win. Whereas on Saturday, I did a big UK event called Axion, and I actually brought Amber Steel Dock Mines, and I had some awful hands, and I just didn't know what to do with them because I just didn't have the game. I hadn't had the practice. I didn't have the game plan, and I just wasn't that prepared for it. So I definitely say focus in on one deck, and I'm sure it'll have its light at some point. And it's always fearing that person who's practiced it 1,000 times rather than someone who's practiced it 100 times, isn't it? That's always going to be better. So yeah, just soak it all in. Just take in as much information as you can, and I'm sure you'll get there. Lorcana is for how old it is now. I think it's about a year, isn't it, or so, or maybe a couple years old. It's still fairly new in TCG terms. We haven't got any overly complicated mechanics added in yet, so I still think it's very easy to jump into.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's nice that Ravensburger has specifically said that they want to make sure that it stays as approachable as possible, whether that looks like the gateway products, moving people into the actual, full decks and everything, or if it's, just trying to keep the game itself relatively simple. I hope that we don't end up in the same boat as Magic where there's, the full paragraph on cards, but,
Oh yeah,
who knows? Who knows what the future holds, but,
yeah.
but yeah, I know that they're prioritizing that, so that's always good. But it's interesting
I
that you
imagine we will get
mentioned.
some more. Oops, sorry.
Oh no, go ahead.
I imagine we will get some more mechanics and complicated things, just because it keeps the game alive. But yeah, I think they're always going to keep it approachable. And to be honest with you, they added Vanish this set. I think besides the Cobra, I haven't seen any Vanish cards.
Yeah.
And they added things like Sing Together. And I think besides Under the Sea and Pirate's Life, we don't really see that very much. So yeah, keeping it light and not having it become what Magic is, where you've got to know like 20 years worth of knowledge just to play, just to start off, isn't it?
Yeah.
I think it's very good if they could approach it the way Pokemon does. That game is always accessible. They have new mechanics, but they rotate old ones out. And so it's if you want to play, you only need to know the latest 2 years worth of stuff to sort of get into it.
Interesting. I didn't know they did that. I knew they cycled out cards and had ban lists and all that kind of stuff, but I didn't know they changed up mechanics too. That's kind of cool.
Yeah, they're into the EX Pokemon, but before that it was V, and that would do, your Pokemon could do a V ability, and now it can do an EX ability, and they're different mechanics, and it always keeps it fresh. I'm also with Pokemon, I can just jump into that, play a few games on the online sim, and just get back straight into the meta. So if they could achieve that, I think it'd be amazing with Lorcana.
Yeah, that'd be cool. You brought up an interesting point about, trying to play decks that you may be not familiar with just because they might, show up as meta decks, strong contenders in the future. I've also heard some people recommend trying out different decks so that you understand how to play against them. Especially if there's other big meta decks out there besides, Blue Steel or something. It's so, as someone who is really, I mean, obviously, like I said, mostly a casual player, I do set champs and I've been to a DLC and stuff. Didn't do very well. But it's hard to get outside that bubble, and actually work with these decks and really actually understand what they're doing. It's
Mm,
one thing to say, "Oh, I know how to counter this card with this card," and I've got something to compensate for this. Um, but it's a whole other thing to sit down and understand how to be able to play something, effectively,
mm.
so that then you can turn around with your pet deck, whatever happens to be, and be able to counter those without having to like think through it every single time.
Yeah, I mean, there was that thing. I've got a lot of friends as well that in their downtime they will just pick up another deck so they can learn it. And
Hmm.
I think it's very good for you because if you keep playing into say Ruby Sapphire and go, oh, they've always got Ice Block and Sisu and they always have it, and then you actually pick up and play it and go, wow, they don't always have it. It's
Yeah.
really hard to set up as well, and it
Yeah.
can be quite awkward. It just gives you that more knowledge on the game, which is always great. I think though for me, what I always think is as long as I know how to play against that deck, I don't mind what it does sometimes, but I do pick up other decks. I play a obscene amount of Lorcana, probably too much Lorcana. So I have to try a few different decks out. But yeah, I think learning the other ones, maybe bring it to like one of the store champs that you do out of how many you do, just to see how it runs. And you might end up learning it and loving it more than the deck you've been playing.
Yep. Yep. You never know.
Mm.
Some some decks you just click with, and if you never try it, then you might not know. So, okay, so I'm curious on a slightly related topic. Um, there's some of the more well-known competitive players that have started taking some of their guides and basically making people pay for them. It's the over on Metafy, a lot of them are. I think do you have one on there too? A page on there?
Yeah, I do have a bit of fun. I've got some guides and things like that on there.
Yeah.
Um, I always try to keep the prices fairly.
Mhm.
I think my aim is like it costs as much as a cup of coffee or whatever. Um, it's just one of those things. The way it's sort of done, I never really have any problems with it as long as they're not obscene amounts of money. I've
Yeah.
seen some of these guides are. Um, and then I did a Metafy tier, and I thought, yeah, I don't really want to take the money from people with this. So, hey, I'll just paywall some videos and say, if you want to, it's like $1.50, and then we'll
Mhm.
try to raise some money for charity,
Yeah.
which I thought would be a nice idea. And yeah, it just sort of keeps the things going. I think as well for a lot of these players, it might not be their job, but to keep them going and to keep doing content and stuff like that, which helps everyone in the community. They might need to earn a little bit of income, and that's completely understandable. I think of like the Labyrinth team, that's I think they're called
Mm-hmm.
Maelstrom now or something, but that's more of an organization. But I think what they provide to the community with helpful guides and videos and stuff like that, it's never the worst to paywall things as long as it feels appropriate.
Yeah, yeah. And I totally agree. I mean, it seems like a lot of the stuff that's out there, I think a lot of people got used to, that stuff just being publicly available.
Mm.
And I'm sure, besides just content creation, putting those guides together is a lot of work. And it's not,
Yes,
it's
yeah.
not just like, oh, I play this deck all the time. Here's what I've learned. This is like, a lot of time spent on your side learning how to play the deck, learning the best lines, learning, any possible, alterations, compensations, how to tech for certain
Mm.
things. That's a lot of effort, to be able to, to be able to compile that down into one guide. I'm sure it's a lot of work, but
Yeah, and with my stuff as well, it's always been I'll everything pretty much I say will be in my videos. It's all out there. And
mhm.
then if you want a written version, here is like a $5 guide where I've written it down and everything like that. And yeah, I mean, when I was preparing for the Continentals, I think I was up till 2 in the morning because Justin, the gentleman I was playing the deck with, was somewhere in America. And it was just like to get the times right to play with him was always so awkward. So it was like up till 2, drink a Red Bull or 3
Mhm.
during the day, do it again, get about 4 hours of sleep.
Yeah.
And then my actual, because I took a coach from London to Paris, which is something you can do
Mhm.
because we have a tunnel uh, underneath the UK. And yeah, I was like, I'll just get all my sleep there. I'll just catch up on like a week's sleep in a 10-hour coach journey. and it didn't really work. So I was fairly tired. I was like so exhausted. They gave us free coffee, which was great because I was just going through so much of that. But yeah, it's quite a lot. I mean, you do it because you love it, though. You don't do it expecting any sort of outcome. And there's another player who goes around and called JDRR. He's on Discord and 20 Law, and he's quite known. And he just does this because he loves it. I don't think he's ever paywalled any content. And yeah, we just love being a part of the community, I think, and being a part of the sort of journey and stuff like that.
Yeah, yeah. I like that. I like especially that you. Well, one thing about the whole, donation to charity. I think that is awesome. By the way, but it's also interesting to hear that it's kind of the same kind of content that you're providing, in your videos, just more distilled, right? So and doing it for the good of the community as well. It's not just like a cash grab where you're like, oh yeah, I'll write up a 2-page guide and sell it and and put it out there. I mean, but the guides that I've seen are, I mean, they're very in depth and they're very well done. So I appreciate all y'all, you, Harlan, and the other people out there that spend the time on this stuff and really try to try to make the community better. And sometimes you like you said, getting compensated for all the work that you put in is not a terrible thing. So
yeah, and most of it tends to go back into it. And if that means the money that you earn goes to affording you going to another event, that would just mean more testing, more playing, more videos, more content. So yeah, you could say that you take the money and then you go to an event, but overall, it's just how it all works. And like I say, with me, I do it in the videos, and then if you want it as a written guide, you can get it. So I never feel like anything's forced or anything like that. I had some people just message me and say I buy the guide just to support you, which is very lovely of them. I really really grateful. It seems to have some really awesome fans out there that love my stuff, which is awesome.
Yeah. Well, keep up the great work. I look forward to Blue Steel guides, more Blue Steel guides in the future. I'm sure they'll be coming down the line. But okay, so I'm curious, and I asked this to people that have played other TCGs before. We're just kind of starting out on this new meta. But I'm curious past that, into the Jafar set and the following ones. I'm curious if there's anything that you think would be a good addition to Lorcana, and anything you don't want to see come to the game.
Yeah, I've been quite a negative supporter of the 2-game format. I try not to shy away from that. I try not to be rude when I say it as well, because just there's no point in being rude. But I've never really enjoyed the experience. It always makes me feel like Swiss is this sort of exam that I have to pass to get into Top Cut.
Okay.
I have to perform these 2-0 wins rather than I play a game, and if I win, that's good. It's on my score sheet. And some other players have mentioned it's like if you were to play a best of 3 and win against some player, like Zach Bivens or Zan or something like that, you go away and that's a story for you to keep. A lot, some people say that they've talked about their old Magic days and they're like, oh, this guy won a bunch of regionals, but I remember I beat him in Swiss in round 3 or whatever, and that stays with them. But getting a 1-1 versus Zan or something like that, it's like, what do you? That no one really does anything with that. It doesn't feel as big. Yeah, it's like it is what it is. So that makes me feel like these best of 2 format Swiss games just feel like you're doing an exam to see if you qualify for Top Cut, which is then becomes best of 3. So I don't love it. I think with Sapphire being dominant in this set, games will go longer. Sapphire Steel mirrors take a long time. Ruby Sapphire mirrors always took a long time. So maybe trying to achieve those best of 3 games will be a little longer, but I don't think 2-game format's the answer. Definitely not in my opinion. But, outside of that, I think they'll have to make a tough decision on the game if they want to do rotations or a ban list. This is not because they need to ban things or they need to rotate cards out. It just keeps a TCG fresh. They've printed some amazing cards like Hiram Flavisham. There's no reason for him to go anywhere with the Porpsicles. So I think what you'd want to do every time you print a new like draw engine mechanic card, it's just, is it better than Hiram? No, well, we're not going to run it then. And it just sort of falls to the wayside. And you've got these set one staple cards like Rapunzel and Maui and things like that, because they're just so good and so well written. Anything you print after the fact is just not going to be included. So it's good to rotate them out. It's good to ban them. It just keeps the game fresh. It's no negative. It's not banning them or rotating them because they're negative on the community. It's just, if we go into a year's time and people are still playing Hiram, imagine having to play Porpsicle on 1 for about 2 years. People will get, like, oh, this is just dull. I've had to do this for the past 2 years and I'm bored of it. You might enjoy it right now because you get to play Bell and do all these busted things, but yeah, you want to keep your game fresh. So I think rotations is better in my opinion. It's worked for Pokemon. It's worked for Magic. Yu-Gi-Oh has a ban list where, every year or so they say, and these cards are banned, and then they change it. So that means that you actually get access to all 20 years worth of Yu-Gi-Oh cards, but only so many of them are banned throughout the year and stuff like that, which I don't really like, because then next year will be like, and this card from 1997 that was only released for 4 months is back in the meta and it's worth $4,000, and it's like someone's got to go find it. And whereas in Yu-Gi-Oh, where in Pokemon and Magic, it's like the latest 2 years of cards are playable. We rotate them out. I know that's going to feel like kind of, oh no, I can't play around Rapunzels and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Don't worry about that. You're definitely going to fall in love with some new cards as they get printed. Yeah. So rotations is really something I want to see them add to the game, and I'm sure they are looking at the ways to keep the game alive.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's always interesting to me to see when new sets come out that people are always like, "Oh, this is a better something," because they'll make it do almost the same thing as the old card, but then there's like a little slight modifier that makes it better. I give them all the credit of trying to figure out these cards and trying to figure out, each set so that things aren't, completely busted, or, they're not too underpowered. We always have problems, but a lot of times, people can kind of work around those problems in creative ways. So, and hopefully cheap ways. But well, cool. Well, hey, Harlan, thank you so much for being on. I really appreciate it. I've had fun talking and learned some great stuff. As someone who, who does want to get better on the competitive side, I appreciate you sharing that knowledge, and hopefully it'll help some other folks as well whenever this gets released. But so I like to end with the same 3 questions for everybody. So right now, your favorite ink and card. 1 ink. You can't pick 2.
1 ink. I think out of the 2 inks that, of course, I have on my mind, I think I prefer Steel.
Okay.
I think because you compare it with so many. If you had to say, I can only play Steel decks for the rest of the game, there's so many I could pick from. There's so many different play styles. But if you said I could only play Sapphire decks, I'm locked into these RAM decks, and I do like all the Sapphire Steel cards. I've always been a big believer in Steel is better than the red cards, and it looks like they are this set. My favorite card, I think, is my favorite card is a Sapphire card. There is probably Alice, the Savvy Sailor. It's sort of, I kind of dropped it for a little bit. I don't know why. Just in testing, it just didn't feel like it was working that well. And then I saw a bunch of people doing really well and winning, making cuts and winning with it. And I was like, it was that sort of I'm coming home, I've missed you sort of thing.
Yeah,
and I just love that card. Yeah, it was that bringing it back, and I sleeved it up, and then it was like playing with that again. It's like, oh wow, yeah, I just forgot how much I love this card. I think it's really powerful, and it's sort of, it's done quite a lot for me as well, with the content creation and competitive play. So yeah, I think that definitely has got to be my favorite card.
Nice. Okay, so normally I ask favorite Disney movie and why, but I have to ask favorite kind of soup.
Favorite kind of soup? Oh wow, yeah, I was asked this. I was asked this on the other one.
I saw that interview, and so I had to kind of slip it in there, but
yeah, there's some local ads for me, and I really like them, and I was just like, favorite soup.
Or Disney
I don't
movie.
know, I
Either
guess
way. I mean, you could do either one.
Disney movie was funny. As well. I think favorite kind of soup is mushroom, but it's
Okay. Yeah.
because I'm vegetarian, so it's kind of
Mhm.
like limited down to a few different soups. But yeah, I think it's mushroom. I think with the Disney film, it's funny. I don't watch a lot of Disney. I've had to start watching the Disney films, and when I did the Ravensburger thing to do the content creator champs, they were like, "What's your favorite film?" I wrote Princess and the Frog down. Don't know why, and then I had to go and watch Princess and the Frog like
Yeah.
very soon afterwards.
Like, I've heard it's
I trust
good.
you.
You know.
Yeah, yeah. I really like Tiana, so I think maybe it's that one. I watched it,
Yeah.
and I think it's really good. And I've watched quite a lot of the Disney films now, but yeah, it was really interesting with the Disney stuff. I've had to go in and watch it. But the thing is, though, I still sometimes some say like, "Have you seen Mulan?" I'm like, no, I haven't seen that one. Like, oh my god, everyone's got their favorite Disney film,
Oh yeah.
and it's like almost offensive to them if you haven't seen it. Um, I was like at an event and I said I hadn't seen The Lion King. I've seen it since,
Yeah.
but you know, it was almost an offensive thing to say you haven't watched
Yeah.
it.
Yeah.
So I really love that in the community, though, how like hardcore Disney fans are as well.
Hmm. Yeah, it's really interesting to see, because I imagine, probably Yu-Gi-Oh, Pokemon, they kind of have the same thing where they've got something outside of the game that might draw
Mm.
people in. But I think, Disney just kind of is such a deep-seated kind of thing for most people. It's like even if they don't watch Disney movies all the time, a lot of times they have fond memories of, one or two Disney movies that they watched in the past. It seems like it's kind of connected with a lot of people's lives.
Yeah,
And
I mean, I've been to Disneyland a few times, and you just know the characters, don't you? Know Cinderella and
mhm.
Rapunzel. You would just know who they are. Whereas I play One Piece, I haven't seen any One Piece either, and people ask me about the characters, and I don't know. But that isn't a sort of universally known. It has a lovely dedicated fan base, but yeah, with Disney,
Mhm.
it's just so many classic iconic characters, and they've got the Pixar movies coming, I'm assuming,
Yeah.
in
Yeah.
2026, and it's just going to get bigger from there. So that was the
Yeah.
one thing that brought me into the game, was that I don't know them that well. I haven't seen them, but I just
Mhm.
know it's a big thing.
Nice. Nice. Okay, and last question. Where can people find you, your content, and everything that, you're putting out there?
Yeah, so HarlanSweete on YouTube, and I've got a Twitter account as well, which I post terrible memes and jokes, so you probably don't have to follow me on there. And then I have a Metafy as well,
Mhm.
like I said, put some guides up. We've got a nice little charity tier, just a low amount. If you can't get through that, I mean, most of that content ends up on the YouTube anyway. So if you can't get through that, it's absolutely fine. They're the places you can get me. Also, just around in Discord everywhere.
Mhm.
So you can always say hi. I always try and respond when I can.
Nice. Cool. All right. Well, thank you so much again. I really appreciate it. And we'll see you around the community.
Thank you very much. Yeah, it'd be nice to meet you in a US event sometime.
Well, thanks for checking out this episode with Harlan. Hopefully, you learned a little something that can help you on your competitive Lorcana journey. If you liked what you heard, make sure and give the show a follow, like, or rating on your platform of choice. You can find the show just about anywhere as @LorcanaChats, on LorcanaChats.com. And if you'd like to reach out directly, you can reach us at LorcanaChats@gmail.com. Happy questing, and we'll see you next time.